And my whole life was kind of revolved around sports. And so I played sports growing up, whether it was baseball, basketball, football. Really, really fell in love with football. That was kind of my passion from like 7 years old until 22, finishing playing in college. And that's where really I ended up going to United States Naval Academy because of football. I sent a letter and called and emailed and sent my game tape. This was back when you used to like send DVD copies of your game tape to people. I sent game tape to every single college in the country that was Division One. I broke into a couple colleges that are Division One, like driving through, like on my way to a tryout. I would stop at like, I think Middle Tennessee State is one of them, where we ended up playing them my sophomore year in a bowl game. But shout out Coach Stockstill if you ever hear this. But I broke into their stadium because it was unlocked, and we were driving through on our way to Vanderbilt for a tryout there, and got into their coaches' offices and was like, perfect. Like I had a stack of.
Are you just leaving your shit on their desk?
Yeah,
that's
literally
awesome,
just going into their offices and check your security cameras from probably 2010. I think this probably was, but just super, super driven to go play college ball somewhere. And I was fortunate enough to kind of get recruited by some different schools. I had Division I offers from Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan, the Naval Academy, and I was getting kind of courted by some of the bigger schools. So like your Stanfords, your Northwesterns. I had decent grades growing up. And the funny thing about the Naval Academy that people don't realize is that there's not usually like a scholarship limit. So they're able to wait on recruits a lot longer than a school like a Bowling Green or an Eastern Michigan, because they can only fill up so many offers. You always offer more people than you can actually take because you don't know if you're going to win all those offers. And so with Stanford and Northwestern, they were telling me basically like, hey, we really like you. Could you also long snap? Could you do some other stuff maybe that could get you on the field in addition to playing linebacker? And I went to camps at both of those places, had a really good relationship with their coaches. And those were kind of dream schools for me as well. Like Northwestern in Chicago, super high academic. Stanford, obviously out in Palo Alto, like beautiful campus. Like,
well, that would have been Stanford. That would have been the time Andrew Luck was there, right? So obviously,
yeah, he was there. He was there when I was getting recruited. It was Shaw was the head coach.
Okay.
Morpheus, like super big, huge dude. But they were just basically like slowly feeding me of like, hey, we still are interested. And I kind of had the Naval Academy in my back pocket of they're not going to fill up. They're never going to tell me I can't come. And so I kind of had one that was somewhat secure. And kind of push came to shove. And whether any of this is true or not, whether I was actually on the bubble with these schools, like who knows? But signing day came around, which is like February, I want to say, back then, in the year you graduate. And I remember I was in the movie theater and Stanford's linebacker coach called my phone. I saw it and I was like, oh God, like this is like the day or two before signing day. And I'm like, this is either like a really good call or he's about to tell me like, hey, do you want to just walk on and do that? I had some offers from like Ivy League schools, but the way that those schools work is it's all need-based aid. And my parents were small business owners. We didn't like make billions of dollars, but we made enough to where I would just be footing the entire bill at a school like Harvard.
Yeah, you're not getting any financial aid because you're probably right over that threshold. Yeah,
just over the threshold, or it's like the classic catch-22. It's like we got to either make less money and then he can get a scholarship, or we need to make a ton more money so we can afford this school,
right?
Or just go into debt up to my eyeballs.
Yeah, another example of a broken system.
Yeah. Well, with name and likeness stuff, like maybe I could have got a sponsorship from like a company or something. Like,
yeah,
hey,
that would have been cool.
This Harvard football player, like I'll come work for you afterwards or something, kind of like what you do in med school. But that was not even remotely a thing back then. And I remember talking to Coach Lamb, if you're hearing this one too. Really, really liked him. And I remember talking and was like, Coach, my mom will make me go to Harvard. Like she'll force me to go if you can find any kind of money for this kind of thing. Like, I don't know, is there a pot of things like I need to talk to somebody else that has the money that I can then get, or I don't know how that works. Like, don't do anything illegal, but like, I'm telling you, I will be forced to go if you can tell me how I could pay for this. And he was just like, Tyler, there's actually nothing like that at Harvard. Like that's not how it works. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't. There's nothing I can do. So long story short, Coach Tarver, he calls me out of the movie theater, and he's like, yeah, we got like 7 5-star recruits that we didn't think we were going to get. We have no scholarships left, but it's up to you if you want to walk on or something like that. And so was like, okay, well, looks like that ship has sailed. The guy I was competing against at Northwestern, they ended up offering him. And so I was like, all right, I guess Naval Academy is my option. And I had gone to the Army Navy game, and that was just like a crazy experience. The pageantry of that game, and just
I can't wait to go to it someday.
It's in DC this year, man. You got to come up.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. It's right down the road. We're going to take the metro to it. But that game was like, ooh, these kind of people seem like it fits my world, like the kind of guys around that football team. I got to meet some of the guys, did an official visit with them, and they're like my people, but was still kind of holding out hope for kind of like the marquee school, like a Stanford or Northwestern. And so I ended up committing to Navy, signing with Navy, and I very distinctly remember being like, Mom, Dad, like, I'm just going to go on a boat for 5 years. Like, who cares? Like, it's not like I'm going to go into the Marine Corps, or like go into the infantry and do something like dumb like that. That would be stupid.
And because like, you said those words, that's exactly what happened. Yep.
Yes. And so fast forward, go to the academy, meet some of the best friends of my life, and super close with all those guys still today. I talk to them like every day, and end up getting through that pipeline. And the academy's got a really interesting way of weeding out people that are there for like selfish reasons. And so like by the time you get to the point where you're having to start putting in your preferences, it started off where like I got to experience what a ship was like, and I was like, ooh, this kind of sucks. Like, I don't want to being a surface warfare officer sounds like I'm just standing duty every day. Nothing against surface warfare officers. I'm sure you guys do a bunch of cool stuff, but for me, I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I'll drink so much coffee, my head will explode. And so I was like, but surely I'll just go fly for the Navy or something. Like, that would be cool. And then I saw the service commitment, and I was like, that's like an 8-year out of the jump thing for a pilot. That's a long time. Like, I don't know about that. And I was slowly getting pulled into the Marine Corps world. And the inside linebacker room at Navy is like almost exclusively Marine Corps ground contracts. Like, that's the people that are in that room for the most part, unbeknownst to me. But it fits an inside linebacker.
It fits that. I was a linebacker in high school too, so I get it, right? Exactly. Linebacker, defensive end, because we small school, right? But just fast, could cover a little bit, and it makes sense. I can relate the infantry to being a linebacker for sure.
Yeah, and of course I'm like, okay, the Marine Corps ground, like I don't want to do air. That's an 8-year contract. That seems like insane. But ground, that there's some cool jobs in there. Like, I would be like an engineer, or like, I don't know, do something else. And of course, I get to the basic school. So the way, for people that aren't familiar with like the Marine Corps officer world, basically you'll commission, and then everyone, no matter what your MOS is, military occupational specialty, gets sent to Quantico, Virginia for 6 months. And that's where you kind of like do the appetizer sampler of the Marine Corps, where you get to see all the different jobs, you get trained very broadly. But most of the focus is in the infantry. So like the Marine Corps prides itself on its officers all at least understanding like, what does it look like to lead a squad of infantry people, or like be a provisional platoon commander.
Well, that's the Marine Corps shtick in general, right? Everyone's a rifleman. Like everyone is a rifleman, from your cook to your highest ranking general, right? Like, that's just your culture. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you read history, especially like some good books on Desperate Ground, I think by Hampton Sides, maybe I'm getting the author wrong, but it talks about Korea, and exactly that's what happened in Korea. Like, they're moving those log trains out of when North Korea was pushing them back. Everyone was fighting, whether it was chaps, like, or everybody. Cooks were on the gun, like all that stuff was happening. So no matter what you do, if you go to Quantico for the basic school, you're gonna do infantry stuff. And sure enough, it was the same song, like different dance. All the people that I really kind of gelled with there were all grunts. All guys that were like smarter than me, that were like, I wanted to be an infantry officer for as long as I can live. And I'm like, I don't know how to take apart a rifle right now. So I would love for you to teach me that piece. And so over that 6-month period, I pretty much realized I was like, there's nothing else for me in the Marine Corps if it's not the infantry. So I remember talking to my staff platoon commander, who's like a captain, who's in charge of mentoring the lieutenants and like training them and helping them decide what they're going to do. And I was just like, sir, like, honestly, like, if it's not infantry, like,
I don't want to do it
or something, because there's nothing else I can do. Like, this is it. I have zero desire to do anything but the infantry. Majority of people get infantry out of TBS. Like, that's the biggest pull of officers is grunts. Because most of the Marine Corps officer corps, a lot of them are infantry officers. I didn't know that either. Like, I was like, whatever I got to do to make sure this happens. It's like 60 of us went to IOC that year from my TBS class. So like the odds of me not getting it were pretty low.
I know at West Point, if you want to be infantry, they're like, yep, done. Like, I mean, you don't even have to worry about it from what I hear. So It's like, you're getting that if that's what you put on that sheet, period, end of story.
Yeah. The Marine Corps ground contract out of the academy at Navy, they just weed you out by like not liking you. So like you realize that like you don't fit in this club, like you don't want to be an infantry officer, or you don't want to be a ground contract or air contract for the Marine Corps. And they're like, it's like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, like this is not the job you're looking for. Like you like self-select out basically. But fast forward to that, did infantry officer course. That's another 3-month long course, and made some really, really good friends in that world. Got sent down to Camp Lejeune, 3-6 down in Camp Lejeune, and was fortunate enough to get a weapons platoon right off the bat, which is for an infantry battalion. A weapons platoon has all of your machine guns, your rockets, your mortars, your explosives, and it's more of like an independent platoon. So you task your guys out. And the other part of that job is you are a fire support team leader. And so you're running all the air support, all the artillery, indirect fires for your company. And so got to do that for about 2 years in Camp Lejeune. And then again, was fortunate enough to get up billeted to Weapons XO. So I was Weapons Company XO for 3-6. And that was another year-long experience there, getting to do it for the battalion. You're kind of like the assistant fire support coordinator for a battalion at that point as a first lieutenant. Really, really fun experience getting to work with a bunch of different MOSs across the Marine Corps. And
in the Corps, is your weapons platoon usually reserved for your shit hot lieutenant? Because I know like in the Army, a weapons platoon, if you want to be a weapons platoon sergeant, it's going to be your most senior E7. And then obviously, within platoons, we all have weapons squad, which goes to your senior squad leader. And so, is it structured the same way in the Marine Corps?
Sort of. At 3-6, we were unique though. We replaced every platoon commander billet with my IOC class. And so we put a dozen brand new second lieutenants into a battalion all at once. And so in a company in the Marine Corps, that
scares me.
I know. Well, this is going to scare you.
No offense, man, but honestly, that's a scary, like brand new lieutenants, 12 of them across the battalion in leadership positions. It's like, where is any kind of continuity of training or anything like that?
Yeah. And they had just come back from the 24th MEU, which was like the Syria deployment where they burned up all those Ardesia batteries. And so they had just gotten back from something somewhat operational. It wasn't like Iraq, Afghanistan of old where they were doing patrols. They were doing a lot of like security and like convoys with our combined anti-armor teams and stuff like that. But it's crazy. Like we showed up, all dozen of us took platoons. So there were brand new second lieutenants in the weapons platoon billets. I was one of them. We had XOs that had done the previous deployment. They stayed to be the company XOs. And then, so they were kind of the continuity. But at the same time, we also had no staff NCOs. So the way that a infantry battalion works is you usually don't get your full complement of people until you're about 6 to 12 months before you deploy. And because they had done that deployment, we were slated for a full 18-month workup before we were going to go do a UDP, which is unit deployment program to Okinawa, Japan. So kind of like a Pacific deployment. And so it was the inmates running the asylum for a long time. I had Lance Corporal platoon sergeants, and the way it ended up working is I actually never had a true staff NCO underneath me. I had one for a brief period of time right before we deployed, but then for reasons he couldn't deploy, and so he didn't come with us to Japan. But pretty much the entire time, I had no staff NCO staff NCO who was like my right hand inside of the most senior platoon in a company is the weapons platoon in the Marine Corps. And so to answer your question, but I basically was just like the foster kid for all the other platoon sergeants as staff sergeants started coming through, and my company gunny was there. And so I feel like that tour for me, at least as a platoon commander, I had like 4 platoon sergeants in reality, because I would always just go to those guys for advice. I had some really good sergeants that some of them didn't make the deployment because they were just due to rotate, but those guys really took care of me. And my company commander let me do a lot of stuff that was just like allowed me to fail in ways that weren't like dangerous. And so I really got to learn a lot from that 2-year period.
Well, I want to praise you for your approach to not coming from. So in the Army, I would get the West Pointers were the most guilty of this. They would come in and they wouldn't listen to any of the NCO leadership at all. You know, it's like, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can shed some light on this for me, but they have this kind of aura about them. And I'm not trying to generalize all service academy graduates, but my experience with most of them was this. And they just come in and I'm a fucking second lieutenant. I don't care if you're an E6 or an E7. I'm in charge, not you. And it's like, you know, when I'm getting to the end of my career and I have a platoon and I get a new platoon leader, I've got 5 fucking years of combat experience. Like, what do you have? You have 4 years of pre-military before the military, and you think you know it all. And it really kind of, it causes problems, man. It really does. And so I want to commend you for you recognizing, like, I don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing. I need to go find the experienced people. And you really didn't have the experienced people around you. So you leveraged, you just looked around you and was like, who can I go talk to? I feel like that's not common in the officer world.
Yeah. And again, it was a really unique battalion where all dozen of us showed up and we all actually liked each other as well.
Which is rare.
Which is also rare. Because we came from the same IOC class. So like all your dirty laundry, you know that guy's dirty laundry. Like, you know who was soft during what training exercise, and like who wasn't competent, at least in the schoolhouse. And so we had a really good core group of guys, and specifically the weapons platoon commanders, we were all really tight. And so we would always like pass information to each other, like, and none of us could care less about a fit rep. So there was never any sort of like, I don't know what they call them in the Army, like OSB or whatever your weird acronyms you have in the Army, but fit rep is basically your report card from your
we call them OERs and NCOERs. So
yeah, OERs. None of us truly could care any less about that. We just wanted to do a good job because it was the right thing to do. And we always bounced ideas off each other. And that was super, super helpful. So having like a real community in that sense where there were no egos, because we were all like, everyone was smart. Everyone was like worked really hard. And that kind of cohesiveness across the battalion was really strong. And so that group of lieutenants really, like, we all cut our teeth at the same time. We were all doing, especially the weapons platoon guys, were doing similar ranges or doing ranges with each other in training. And so that was super helpful for everybody. Our gunner, the way the Marine Corps battalion works, is you have a gunner who, the Marine Corps, like, a gunner is a god. Like, he's your senior infantry tactics instructor. Like, he knows everything about everything.
He's the crustiest guy too, probably.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I'm like extremely extroverted, and I'm also like really hard to embarrass. And so I had no problem going knocking on Gunner's door and be like, Gunner, like, this is what I'm about to do. No idea. Does this work? Does this make sense? And he would just like be really, really gracious with his time and mentor the lieutenants. Because you can have terrible gunners who suck. and they're really knowledgeable, but it's the exact flip side of what you're talking about with West Point guys.
And
where it's
again, I fully admit that. I'm totally willing to admit that I was never that person. I was the one that wanted the lieutenants to come to me and pick my brain, because I've done this. You've learned from a manual. I've learned from real life experience. Like, let's compare notes and get this right. But yes, to your point, there are plenty of guys, both sides, that are not that way at all. So
it's people management. It's people leadership. And like the way I always told my guys, like I viewed doctrine was more like a highway and not like a railroad, where it's like, I don't really care what the book is. I care that you know what's in the book. But at the same time, there's times we're going to have to get off the highway and take a back road that's not inside the book, because that makes sense. But there's times that we're going to have to stay on the highway, even though there's traffic, because of certain things. And so Gunner Domino and Gunner Latham were my two gunners at 3-6, and they're both awesome guys that really, really helped out to kind of mentor the younger dudes. And then we had great staff and COICs eventually that checked in, that were able to kind of mentor, especially me, with a lot of different stuff, where like in a weapons platoon is unique in an infantry battalion, because you're tasking your guys out to these other platoons. And so I would kind of get to backseat and watch them, how they worked with their guys, and learn it like the osmosis that way, because they were tasking out my dudes. Like I knew if I was sending somebody to like second platoon, it was Staff Sergeant Wojcik was going to be the guy who was watching over my dudes with my really good friend Shane, who's the platoon commander over there. And so it's like, you get to work those relationships and kind of learn that way. But as is tradition with the Marine Corps, it's like do more with less. You're not going to get the manning. It wasn't a combat deployment, so we weren't getting like pushed a bunch of people to kind of be round up. But then, so it was a great experience, man. My time in the infantry was very, very formative, and it's one of those reasons why I think people join the military, is to do stuff that you can't do in the civilian world. And the Marine Corps Infantry was like, I'm not going to be in the infantry in the civilian sector. Like, that's not a thing unless I go work for Black.
I promise it's not a thing. I've been out for 9 years and I still can't find it. So exactly. It's definitely not a thing. So you're still active duty, and I don't know if I mentioned that in the opening or not, but letting everybody know you're still active duty. So you leave the infantry world. What are you doing now? You're living in DC. We just talked about the Army Navy game. Definitely interested in doing that, because fun little rivalry there. But what do you do in DC? And then we're going to move into the entrepreneurship piece of it, because I think you're doing something that I haven't seen anybody do, and that's setting yourself up for not having a painful transition when you get out. You realize that the Marine Corps for you is not forever, and it's not who you are. You're not your identity. So let's talk about what you're doing now, and then we'll move into what the entrepreneurship side looks like.
Yeah. So after 3-6, I got orders to Naval Postgraduate School. So that's a master's program. And the way the pipeline works is you do your 4 years, which includes your basic training type stuff, your first unit, and then the Marine Corps sends you on what's called a B billet. And for me, my B billet was go get a master's degree in operations research, which is like data science, machine learning, AI, all that kind of stuff. And that's in Monterey, California, which is like the most beautiful place on the planet.
Yeah, that's where DLI is at, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm fucking jealous of all those DLI assholes.
Oh man. Yeah. When we were getting ready to PCS back to DC for this set of orders, me and my buddy Matt, who's the weapons platoon commander I was mentioning as well, he also got orders to NPS, and so did the other weapons platoon commander. So all three of us did weapons platoon, did stuff with weapons company as well, and then got sent to NPS on 2-year orders together as well, which is
that's really crazy. So you got to stay with some really good buddies. Which is super rare in the military. That didn't happen ever.
Yeah, and it gets crazier because me and Matt bought houses right next door to each other in Monterey. And so not only did we end up going to Monterey together, but we bought the identical new build end unit townhomes literally 30 yards or 20 yards away from each other. So we spent 2 years, got to see his son when they first came home from the hospital. And so just an experience that like you don't usually get in the military. They're like, you're going to make these best friends and then you're going to leave them forever. But the Marine Corps is so small that sometimes you kind of strike gold and stuff like that happens.
Did you guys plan to buy houses next door to each other, or did it just happen that way?
Well,
you planned it, didn't you?
We
got
our orders.
I saw the smirk.
We got our orders in like December for a June PCS. And like, I'm a real estate guy. I'm sure we'll talk about real estate stuff, but I was looking for a house to buy. We had done some deals in North Carolina, and I found this neighborhood, and it was like, this is a deal. Like, this is really good. New construction. Like, we'll be able to put under contract in the wintertime when you want to be buying houses, is the wintertime if you can. But there was like a limited quantity. And I had just gotten married. So me and Lindsay were married for like 4 or 5 months. And I remember coming up to the 3 shop where Matt was the assistant OPSO after we had gotten our platoons. Like, I was a weapons XO. Like, they needed a good guy up in the 3 to like make sure training was happening, because they didn't have a captain to fill that role. So he was basically stepped into that. Our captain or major, like the OPSO job is really a major. So Matt was doing that role. I remember coming up to the 3. I was like, dude, I can't tell you where yet, but I need you to get ready to like call this number I'm going to give you. We're putting a house under contract. You guys got to put the house right next door to it under contract. But I've got to make sure that we get it, or my wife will kill me. And so that's exactly what happened. We both put the same floor plan, different finishes, like identical mirror images of each other. Put that under contract. It's probably the best investment I made, because I have a crystal ball. Back in 2019, like, new construction in 2019 has done very well.
I'm sure. So
it's like that went through the roof for both of us, and it's like our best performing rental in our portfolio right now. But all that to be said, go out to NPS, get a master's in OR. We can talk in detail about starting the business at that point. But did 2 years out there, and now I'm currently serving as Marine Corps Recruiting Command's sole data scientist. And so I do all the machine learning, AI, statistics for basically what you could kind of call the sales department of the Marine Corps, where it's like, how are we getting good people to get put on the yellow footprints, ship them off the boot camp on the enlisted side, as well as the officer side with sending them to OCS and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. So this is usually the part of the show where people have decided to get out and they start to find their passion for entrepreneurship or whatever. But since you're still active duty, it's a good opportunity for us to turn this into kind of a learning experience for those that are transitioning or have transitioned, and like what you're doing to set yourself up. Because like I said just a few minutes ago, I think you realize, more than most, I didn't realize that I was a lifer. I was infantry till I die. It just was what it was. I didn't have any foresight afterwards. I just worried about getting to my 20. You're setting yourself up. You have 2 companies that I know of. You're investing in real estate, which I also knew about and didn't mention because, that's not your primary business.
Yeah.
So what sparked the entrepreneurship bug for you? But moreover, how did you decide that you needed to start setting these systems up now instead of, and how do you find time for it? Because I think our careers looked very different. I was in 2003. I think you were probably still a baby, like in school, probably, but from 2003 to 2015, I was deployed every other year. I tried to go to college once. I got my commander to sign the paperwork. I enrolled in the class. Day 2 of the class, the commander brought me a signed withdrawal slip saying, you're going to NTC. You need to drop these classes. And that's before online classes. I had physical textbooks and these they're weird bubble things that I had to fill in it was weird, man. It was really weird. And I was just like, this
use as your calculator.
Yeah, there you go. Right. But for me, it was like, that was early in my career. I was still private and trying to take advantage of the things, because points-based promotion and all of that, college classes get you more points as an enlisted guy so you can make your next rank or whatever. But I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, okay, I came home from the first deployment, had orders on the parade field for the second deployment. I was like, well, there's not going to be time for college. We're not going to get this done. So how do you find time for all the things you're doing? What's the thinking behind the things that you're doing? How did you get inspired to get into this stuff? Because that's another common thing, right? The reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I identified that veterans basically have no knowledge that they can be entrepreneurs. Nobody's ever presented to them that they can own something that is theirs, that they build from the ground up, or they buy and make better or whatever. So, I want to solve that problem, because to me, the path back to purpose is entrepreneurship. You own it. It's yours. You control it. I think you will agree. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. This is my job. I get to do this for a job. This is awesome. So I know that was a lot, man. I'm sorry, but
great.
Floor is yours, dude.
Yeah. I mean, to really unpack that, like, you got to go back to coming back from my deployment to Japan. And I was engaged at the time. And when I graduated IOC, I was the guy who bought the house that everyone lived in. And so I bought the house, filled it with 4 of my buddies, and didn't pay a mortgage the whole time I was in Camp Lejeune, because I was just renting out the bedrooms to my buddies. It was like $400 for your own bedroom and bathroom, and like a good house. Like, we all were deploying and like training all the time. So it wasn't like the house was really getting that beat up.
Did you know that this was going to be a catalyst at the time, or was this just something like you had no idea about the power of real estate, right? I just want to like paint the picture, because I didn't either. I bought my first house at 21 in 2006. It was worth about $30,000 more than what I paid for it. But however, I'm on my second 16-month deployment, and we all know what happened in 2008, and that essentially cost me a bankruptcy. That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of experience with it, not really knowing what I was doing in the real estate. I just knew I wanted a house and didn't want to piss money away on rent.
Yep.
Hindsight's 2020.
Exactly where I was at. Was I knew I needed to live somewhere. I knew that buying a house wasn't a dumb thing to do. I knew a little bit about the VA loan, so I knew that I could do it with no money down. And I knew I wanted to live with my buddies. I didn't want to we didn't want to go hunt for a place to live that was okay with us and dealing with all that stuff. And so I was just like, guys, I'll buy the house. Like, just come live with me. I'll charge $400 a month. That's exactly pretty much what my mortgage was when I had four other guys living in it. It was like $1,600 a month for my mortgage, taxes, and insurance. And it was like, this seems like a win. Like, we get $1,600 a month for BAH down there as an 01. And so everyone's like, yeah, let's just do that. And so that was the first thing. And like, I think when vets hear all these podcasts, especially when they hear someone like me talking about like being an entrepreneur and doing all these things, and they see like the end product of essentially what's been 8 years worth of slowly building things, they think that, like, especially your junior enlisted guys, like, I'm very sensitive to the start some crazy side hustle while you're on an operational unit that's doing stuff. Like, I would advise against doing those kinds of things. Like, my start was buying that one house, understanding what it was like, because I had to live somewhere. And then when I deployed to Japan, I was engaged. And my wife, I don't know why, but she did not want to live in a frat house with 5 lieutenants.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And so we bought a house down the street, like a cheaper house that we could put a bunch of sweat equity into. And so it was like a hurricane damaged house. It had nothing in it. And in my mind, that was like, I'm still going to need a place to live. I'm still working these 14-hour days, which are insane. But I have like a small window of opportunity when we get back from this deployment to spend about a month fixing this place and making it livable before my wife and I get married in October of that year. And so I capitalized on that. I put that house under contract before we left for that deployment and closed on it about 2 months before we got back from that deployment. And so I had a really long escrow. And when I closed on it, it was like, when you come back from a deployment, you're usually working in the mornings and then they cut you loose, spend time with your family, or you take post-deployment leave. I didn't take any leave. I would work my 6 hours or whatever, doing whatever I was doing. And then I would come home and I would be laying floors until midnight that night, wake up at 5 and do it again for like a month.
The grind.
Yeah, just getting after it. But that house right there, we lived in it. And then I was a weapons company XO, which is arguably one of the busiest jobs in an infantry battalion, until we got orders and left in June. And so I had those 3 years worth of experience, basically understanding like how to do kind of the basic blocking and tackling. And buying this next house, we sold both those houses in North Carolina in order to buy the house in California. And when we did that, again, I was a newly married guy. Me and my wife were still getting to know each other and figuring out, like, I'm a Christian, so my faith is like something that's really important. And we always have tithed off of our income, which is like a 10% donation to the church or charity, or whatever. But with real estate, like when you sell a house, there's not many paychecks that are just like, here's 50 grand deposited into your account. Like what did we want to do with that kind of money if that started happening? And so for us, it was like the very beginning of our marriage, figuring out how do we want to be generous. And my wife, her mother runs an anti-human trafficking nonprofit called Unbound Now. And Lindsay was like, why don't we just donate our tithe from this to Unbound? Like that would be cool. And I don't know if Susan is running this thing like out of her garage on a laptop, like sending out a newsletter, or like, what is this Unbound Now thing? Like, is it legitimate? Like, I don't know any of it, but I'm like, I'm sure this is fine. Like, it's my mother-in-law. Like, my wife wants to do it. Like, let's just do that. Like, that's the easiest option. And I don't really care. I just know that I shouldn't be the one to hold on to all this cash. I should be giving it in some way, shape, or form. And so we did that. And then Susan called me and was like, Tyler, just so you understand, for $5,000, like, that's enough for us to employ someone full time in a country like Mongolia, where they're doing nothing but stopping people being sold into slavery.
So your tithe to the nonprofit sparked the overseas talent agency
In a lot of ways, yeah.
This is cool, man. This is really cool.
And it was like the gateway drug of like, you can understand this. Like, you did 20 years, you were an infantry guy. Like, I really dislike this like military influencer culture of like, I'm going to be in uniform and do all this super cringy stuff and like,
I hate it.
Basically grift.
Hate it.
Yeah,
I hate it. And I didn't do 20. I was medically retired at 13. So
yeah. But you did some serious time.
I did my time. Yeah.
And operationally, and like the last thing I wanted to do was be that guy that like starts a business and is still active duty and is doing it and just making all this money and like renting Lamborghinis and like doing marketing that way. But I could stomach it. I could stomach starting a business if it had something bigger behind it than just us making a bunch of money. And so we partner with Unbound as a charity partner, basically. So all of our charitable donations from the business go towards Unbound. And have you read that book? Like, if you give a mouse a cookie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to ask for a glass of milk.
It's going to ask for a glass of milk. It's going to ask for a glass of milk. And so I'm like a spreadsheet guy. And so we flipped that one house. That was like a round it to 50 grand came back to us. And I was like, that was like one person full-time job for one house that we flipped. Like, and we didn't even try to flip it. It just happened because we just sold it and the market went up and that was cool. But people make money doing this. And like, if we hired it out and did it like a little bit more professionally, like that's not going to be a huge time sink on me potentially. Like, I don't know anything about business. But I'm also in a set of orders where I'm a full-time student. I don't have anyone underneath me. I don't have any responsibilities other than like learning how to read and like code essentially. And so it was a time in life where we didn't have kids, didn't have people that were relying on me to like do stuff other than myself. And so I felt okay about doing that, felt okay about starting a business that had something behind it that was more than just making money. And so we're like, if we're going to flip one house, like that's a lot of work to just flip one house. Like, why don't we try and flip two houses? It's like, well, if you flip two houses, you kind of probably have a system figured out. Why don't we just try to flip three houses? And I was like, well, crap, if we're going to do that, like, why don't we just turn this into a legitimate business while we're out here in Monterey, figure out what that looks like while I have enough time to make all these mistakes managing, and like I can grit my teeth and make it right by just effort, and spend 2 years and see what happens at that point. And so that's what we did. We started off as, I call ourselves like recovering house flippers, where it's like, for people listening, flipping houses is the worst way to invest in real estate. It's like actually really dumb to do that. But it's a really good way to start investing in real estate because you learn how to work with other people's money, how to work financing, how to manage a project, how to like work people like in a way that everyone's winning, how to manage, how to like do all the different aspects of a business, but on a much more compressed timeline of only like 6 to 12 months, instead of starting something where like if you're syndicating real estate or you're doing like longer term investments, you're going to marry somebody for 5 to 10 years on these things. And we had experiences where it's like, man, we didn't set that up right expectation wise from a partnership. Next deal, we'll do it this way. Next deal, we'll do it this way. And that let us iterate over that 2 year period to where over 2 years, we flipped about 20 different properties in Texas from start to finish and learned just a ton about what does that actually look like. But through that process, we hired somebody overseas to basically be my executive assistant for all the military people, almost like a staff secretary or like an XO or an OPSO type person. And Christine is her name. And it's like when people like ask me like, how are we doing all this stuff? It's like, well, we have this process. It's called Christine. And they're like, okay, acronym. It's like, it's a person. She keeps the trains on the tracks at all times. And so that 2 years was super, super helpful. And to kind of bring it back to like the influencer like culture that exists, like now we have a staff that does a bunch of stuff for us. Like we've got 3 full-time people that work for us. We've got partners, we've got independent contractors in different places. My wife is full-time with the business. And so if you look at me online, you're going to see a bunch of stuff, but it's not all me. It's like our company is doing these things. I'm kind of like a face of a lot of it. Like it's not like I'm using like all the stuff that we're saying on social media and posting out into the world is me, but it's enabled by so many different people in a long-term vision behind that kind of stuff.
Well, and so that's the idea of the personal brand behind the business, because without the personal brand, how do you have business, right? And it's they go hand in hand. And you're right. Like I hate it. I see it a lot. The solopreneur stuff. And it's like, yeah, you can run something by yourself to an extent, but you get to a point where now you have to start putting a team around you. I have a team. I have a team that's working for free right now until we can split percentages of profits. But that's the way that it's done. You have to find people to surround yourself with to take things off of your plate so that you can go do other things to move the business forward. And you're a prime example of that because you're in California, right? You're full-time active duty, grinding it out on nights and weekends. And you're also doing it 3 states away in Texas, right? Right? Like you're not doing it right down the road where you can go check all this stuff. So you've added an extra layer of shit you have to figure out too. And you just find a way to figure it out. Like it just happens.
And you make sacrifices. Like you don't, like in Monterey, most people golf a ton. I didn't golf at all. Like I was working. Like I was up at 4 a.m. taking investor calls on the East Coast, doing a bunch of things. And we grinded for like 6 months before we bought our first property, just trying to figure it out. Right. And so that gets lost on a lot of people in this day and age where it's like you can just find someone on LinkedIn or find somebody somewhere and they're going to be like, over the last 2 years, I did X, Y, and Z. And you're like, but I also worked for 6 years before that. And also really goes all the way back to being 7 years old, playing Little League football. Like all these different things accumulate in people's lives to where people are starting at different points all the time, not for better or worse. It's just reality. And the way to get to where other people are going, there is no substitute for hard work. Like people will sell you a course, but you have to do the work and you have to make those sacrifices at some point. Like, and it can happen really fast sometimes, but really sometimes you just get lucky. Like you got lucky with that.
That's what I think. That's what I think, right? Like I'm on a mission to put the gurus out of business. Those are the people who claim, oh, you can be making $10,000 a month by the end of the month if you buy my course. And it's like, no, I'm going to buy your course because I've done this, and you're not going to tell me what I need to know, and you're going to upsell me to the next part of your course that's supposedly going to tell me what I need to know. And really, the only thing you need to know is it's massive action, relentless action, just taking action and learning the shit you don't know, because there's a ton of it. There's a ton of it, and it never stops coming. And you just continue to learn and grow and implement and learn and grow and implement. And that's the secret. That's what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes what it takes, and it's not, there are no real shortcuts. And so that 2 years for us was just insanely critical of giving us the headspace and the time to really figure out what does it mean to actually run a business? What does it mean to take on investor capital? What does it feel like to get squeezed? Because that's something that you won't see on Instagram, social media. Like, we had some deals that didn't go the way we wanted them to, and we had to have hard conversations with people. And it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows. Like, there were times where I was waking up at 3:00 in the morning going, I don't know how we're going to make this work. And we still have stresses. Like, we're growing stuff all the time. And so it's like, don't let it get lost that it actually doesn't happen overnight. And then the other thing is, like, numbers are just on a spreadsheet, and it's not really that exciting to see you hit your goals, like, after you hit the goal. Because we hit our financial goals way faster than we thought we would. And then it happened. And then the next day I woke up and I went to work. And it wasn't like some nirvana experience of like, the bank account said this, had this many zeros in it. Like, woo! It was like kind of not that great. But like donating money and like being a part of something bigger than yourself.
That's the part.
That never gets old. That truly never gets old. And so that first 2 years was us doing pretty focused in on just flipping single family homes. And then when I knew, as soon as we moved to DC, where we are now, and I was going to be back in like quasi the real Marine Corps, where I'm like working in a real job. It's not like I can just do 4 hours worth of school and call it good that day, and just work whenever I want to work on school, because that's essentially a master's program, way different than like a bachelor's. Like, you're so much more on your own program that you're not taking nearly that many classes, and you have time to do that. But here I knew I was going to be working a true like 8 to 5, like regular office type job. How could we build something intentionally from the start of that when we get to this point, the machine's running and I'm just making decisions, but they're not tied to my own time. And so that's where we are now, where with LTG, that's the name of our company. That's like the parent company that then owns interest in all the other stuff that we're doing. So like Ardesia Architecture and Design is my wife's design firm. So like LTG is the owner of that firm.
LTG family office.
Yeah.
Family office.
Yeah. Family office without the money. That's the only issue. Most family offices are like $1 billion.
Oh, that's coming. It's coming. Yeah. Just keep doing what you're doing, man.
Yeah. That's kind of the goal. That would be really cool to eventually run your own family office. But that's the mentality we have now. And all of the things that I do, I make sure that they're not tied to my time, and they're tied to results. And so for folks that are still active duty and didn't have the ability to be in a job that enabled you to kind of figure out all those other things, like, my best advice for you guys is like, be an excellent Marine. Be really, really good at that job, because those skills, I promise you, and that mentality and like work ethic, it carries over into business, and you can't get that time back. And like, you will never be able to have that experience again while you're active duty doing stuff, especially if you're in charge of other people. And figure out a way that your normal Marine Corps job, normal Army job, what is the skill set that you need to be really good at inside that job? And then figure out a business that revolves around that skill set. Because for me, like, as a data scientist for the Marine Corps, like, I code all day long. Like, I do nothing but think about like machine learning and all these different like algorithms and how can we optimize X, Y, or Z inside of our business processes. But I also do consulting for businesses where I do that for them. And so I'm able to kind of double dip into my Marine Corps world and train and do skills there that are helping the mission, but then take those same skills, apply it to a different data set inside the private sector. Oh, and by the way, stuff I've learned in the private sector, I'm bringing it into the Marine Corps. We're doing stuff that I do as a business person in my operational Marine Corps tour. And I'm not saying that I'm like bleeding data over where it's like there's any sort of like legalities involved, but it's like, hey, this is how I run my meetings with my company. We should probably consider running these meetings this way
here
in the Marine Corps.
You're not bleeding over data. You're bleeding over systems and efficiencies and just, things, lessons learned. It all transfers. I love that you're relating, because you're right. Be the best soldier, Marine, airman, whatever that is right now. Be the best of that, because those, I call them high leverage skills, right? You learn those from the day you come in. You're working on those constantly, and you're right. They're absolutely right. It sets you up to transfer to the business world so well. More so, I've had several people on the show say it, more so than just a regular civilian, even because you're working on these skills. So that's amazing, man. So LTG Assist is up and running, and that's largely how you're able to run businesses while being active duty, because you have this offshore talent that you have trained up to do specific tasks for you. And this stuff fascinates me, because when I started out, I knew there were some tasks that I didn't want to do. I hired a virtual assistant to do some tasks and had a pretty horrible experience with it. So let's talk about your approach and really educate people, because I think this is one of the big starting points to building a team, is taking some of those administrative tasks off your plate. Because in the beginning, when you're building a business, this as well as I do, you're either trading time or you're trading money. And most of us don't have money to trade, so we have to trade our time. So when you do get a little bit of money, you want to buy some of your time back, right? And so where do you suggest people should start looking to buy some of that time back? And what are some of the tasks that overseas talent, because it is cheaper? And I know there's going to be a lot of opinions on this, like, well, you guys could pay them more for what they're doing. And it's like, yeah, but you have to understand where they live, the amount of money we're paying them. We're paying them more than fucking doctors get paid over there. Like, they're getting paid really well. They're not hurting, I promise you. So, like, please educate me, because I'm ignorant to this stuff, and I'm getting to a point where, like, this is probably my next step.
Yeah. So I think, like, the military does an insane job of teaching you that, like, it's okay to delegate. And, like, contrary to popular belief, like, it's okay to delegate a task where it's not going to get done as good as you would have done it, but it's still getting done because you delegated it. And that's kind of my mentality with assistants and with staff or employees. Insert someone who relies on you for their paycheck, like, insert that. And so it's understanding, like, what does actual delegating look like? What does it look like? Give clear tasks. Like, to bring it all the way back to, like, the Marine Corps, like, mission-based orders. Like, what is that actually in the world of business? Like, giving an end state and hoping that they carry it out according to how you would carry it out, like your commander's intent, that kind of stuff. To get just super buzzwordy, like, for the Marine Corps folks, like, all that kind of stuff.
We call it task conditions standards in the Army. It's an op order, right? 5 paragraphs to an op order.
Right.
That's what you want.
It kind of is, and that's what's super interesting. The folks that we've hired for that are Marine, like, vets, like military vets, they do insanely well with assistance because they understand that, and they're willing to accept the risk of a task not happening exactly how you want it to. And so that's, like, a big thing. And another big lesson that we've learned recently is, like, the risk isn't really with the VA after they've made it through our screening process. The risk is you. The risk is the CEO understanding how to actually delegate and understanding how to task, being not having everything in a box, because your assistant, in my opinion, should be the one that builds it with you, but, like, having a clear vision and mission that they're driving towards, that they can bring that assistant along with them in order to help build it. And so the things that we had Christine do at the very beginning, like, we spent all this time with her now, where she just basically reads my mind. But it's the same relationship you have with a platoon sergeant, platoon commander, where this person should be leaning into tasks that you don't have time to lean into. They should be thinking creatively. They shouldn't be robots. Like, the first hire that I always recommend for people, if they have a business, is they should hire a true executive assistant. It shouldn't be like, oh, I need help in marketing, and so I just need to hire this marketing guy. It's like, no. You need to hire an executive assistant, and then hire that executive assistant that maybe has a bent towards marketing, so they can help you a little bit initially. But really, you're going to need a true executive assistant to then help manage that other person too, to where that's where you start getting all these synergies and whatnot. And the military, naturally, you understand these things because you lived in a hierarchy like that. Like you lived where there was a CEO or platoon commander or company commander or battalion commander. He had his XO who was in this lane. He had his OPSO who's in this lane. Like that's how the Marine Corps military, all that stuff works.
So to break this down for people, like understanding that an executive assistant is essentially an XO for your business. That's really what it is. It's the executive officer who is doing all the planning, basically all the shit that you don't want to do.
Yeah. And doing it well, doing it excellently, and doing it in a way that the thing that we found most people's fears with hiring someone overseas is like, how do I know they're working? How do I know like I'm getting my money's worth out of that person? How do I know all these different things? And it's like conditions-based tasks is what I love. It's probably the infantry officer in me, but it's like I always assign tasks that because of the way they're getting done or because of what is getting done for that task, I have visual feedback of what that thing is. Like if I said, hey, we need to build out an email template and then go ahead and send that to the whole team so we can see what that sequence looks like. And so our developer, she builds out an email template. She does all the different things. I know she has to work on, make sure the integrations work, or else I'm not going to get that test run at the end of the day. And so like, that's an example. That task happened Thursday, like just like off the top of my head. And so the way you task these things is you task them in such a way that you have built-in feedback mechanisms so that you know that they're working when they're working. The two-way communication, like an open door policy, like that's a good idea. You need to have those in business too. Like have the ability for your employees and your assistants to give you real feedback and also ask questions for when they're not sure about something or whatnot. And so it's like that's where you start is with like a true executive assistant who's going to organize like all the aspects of your life with a bent towards what is your biggest problem right now. And so they can do most of the administrative stuff and then help you start chipping away. Because honestly, if it's your biggest problem, you probably need to solve it sometimes.
Where it's like not sometimes, all the time. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And it's like you get to a certain point at scale where like no one needs to. I don't need to go hire someone to do. I don't need to be doing email marketing. Like I don't. I can hire out that task, but I've paid my dumb tax of understanding like this is the function that needs to happen. And I have people in my network that I can ask about certain things to know to hire a good person for it. But like, if you're talking like true sales, but you haven't figured out your product market fit, you haven't figured out all those other things, your time is better spent working on those pieces of things inside your business and having someone else handle all the minutia, all the details, keeping the train on the tracks and moving it forward that way. And as you build that relationship with that person, they take even more tasks off your plate. But with Christine, initially it was like, we need somebody to help us manage this flipping machine. We've got a dozen properties right now that are all happening at the same time. We've got to be able to track down all these orders. And so she was very task-based initially, but over time, that's what we realized was like, man, she's really functioning as like an executive assistant, almost more so than she is like a project manager. And as we've grown and as we've seen the guts of other businesses, that's the real key takeaways. Like the first step for somebody, if they've never hired before, ever, hire just a lights out executive assistant. They'll be your operations officer. They'll be your XO, and they will give you the brain space to be able to realize what your real problems are inside your business and take you away from all this decision fatigue of like responding to all these different emails, like stuff that like you can do, like you're smart enough to do it. But man, does it suck to have to just grind away at that all day long and like think about it and like, am I missing something? So I don't know. That's my soapbox on like the first hire that you should have is a true EA.
I like that, man. And it makes a lot of sense because basically they're there to find holes in your systems. And if they're good enough, they'll help you plug those holes. And, you know, I know my experience with the VA wasn't the greatest. and largely because, like you said, the dumb tax of just not knowing what I don't know. It's a lesson I had to learn. But, there was a lot of good things that came, systems that I still use to this day that were her ideas, not mine, because they just, that's what they have a lot of pride in what they do, and they're really good at it. And so my next question to you is, what about all these people that are saying, well, why overseas? Why not hire, from our own country? And obviously it's cost related, right? So, what can you expect to budget for a good executive assistant hire? And we talked about this before we started recording. You have a couple of metrics for ROI and all kinds of stuff like that. And I think they're really interesting. And I think they can shine a lot of light on how to actually go about hiring somebody and what you should plan for. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like to do, like when we brought Christine on board, we were flipping houses and making between like 20 and 40 grand profit on each house we were flipping. And so in my mind, I was like, all I got to do is flip one more house and I pay for her salary that year and it's worth it. And so the ROI initially was like, as long as I make my money back, like I'm learning so much from having to actually hire somebody, that's worth it. In reality, now that we're like a little bit more refined, like I would say that whatever that person's cost is, they should be able to at least bring in 4 times the revenue from that salary. So to talk in like true numbers, we're hiring folks usually at like the $1,200 to like $1,400 a month, US dollars a month for full-time work. And you brought it up earlier, but it's like when I heard that too, like my mother-in-law works for an anti-human trafficking nonprofit. Like, don't get it twisted. I'm like, that seems low. Like, how do you survive getting paid that much? Like, no one would be able to survive on that. Like, that's way below minimum wage, like dollars. Like, how does that work? But in a country like the Philippines, which is where we're hiring, the median income for someone is like $800 to like $900. And so these are good jobs that we're providing for folks.
Yeah, pretty near double the median, right? Which is, I mean, that's not insignificant.
Mm-hmm. And this is post-inflation as well. This isn't like
we're talking right now. This is right now.
This second in 2024, end of 2024, $1,200 to $1,400 a month for someone who's a killer. Like we're talking people that have MBAs. We're talking people that have like 5 to 6 years working in that industry, whatever the industry is that you're hiring for. So there's some really deep benches of talent, and something that we appreciate in the U.S. We don't appreciate enough in the U.S. I guess unless you live in like the national capital region with I-95 and how terrible that traffic can be. But like a lot of the people we're hiring, they're getting paid $3 to $4 an hour working in an office on site in the Philippines for some other company. And they're driving 3 to 4 hours one way to get to that place because the transportation system in the Philippines, it's like 2-lane roads. Like Christine, she lives in Cebu City area of the Philippines, and she has an aunt who lives 20 minutes away if there's no traffic. If there's traffic, she's going to be stuck in traffic for 2.5 hours going to her aunt's house.
No thanks.
And so it's like we're seeing the wave of people that have like, we're talking like 35-year-old, 45-year-old people sometimes. Not that like the age matters, but just like understanding they've been in the workforce for a long time and they're now coming to do online work because they're like, I can't spend 3 hours a day one way driving to work. Like I need to get an online job and I'm going to get paid more. It's like, you kidding me?
It's so apparent that that's happening because I get cold DMs on LinkedIn daily from very transparent. They're not really pitching me. They're like, hey, I do this, and this. Like, I think I could be a good fit for you. If you're willing to hire, let me know. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. They're flocking in droves to the online world. And I think it's the same story in the United States, right? Like everybody after COVID has realized we don't need to be in an office anymore. I don't need to sit in LA traffic for 4 hours, each way or whatever. So, that's awesome. How do you go about training these people to do the tasks that you want to do? And this was an interesting post I didn't get to comment on the other day, but I'm curious what you came up with, because I believe like what I really like about your content is you're genuine in, I guess, admitting like where you're weak. And that's not what I mean, but like you present your content in a way that's like, I want input from others so that I can be better. And it's very transparent. It's like, I don't know what the best answer is. It's straightforward, right? Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm willing to hear what everybody else has to say, because that's how ideas come. That's how systems get refined. So how do you approach hiring and training, and what advice do you have for those that are looking to get an executive assistant or hire talent outside of the United States?
Yeah. And that's the post you're referencing. It's like, we get thousands of applicants for stuff, like, and some of them are just like right at the tip of being good. But when you're only hiring for a select number of positions, like, we're only going to hire the best person. And that doesn't mean that like there's a huge drop off between person number 1 and person number 20, And so
it's marginal.
It's very marginal. And again, like I brought up earlier, the real risk is in fact the CEO. It's not the VA. It's the CEO and them running a good business. And so when it comes to training is not an issue for the people we're hiring. Like, the people we're hiring are like Christine's. Like, they're people they're already assassins. They know how to they've been in multiple different businesses. They've seen it before. Where we focus our training is, we have a VA boot camp that we run the VAs through. And it's very like function based, where here's how we manage email. Here's how we manage travel. Here's how we manage X, Y, and Z function. That's like a 3-minute video, 4-minute video walking them through that. But then Christine does onboarding calls with them and actually integrates into that person's systems with them. So
Which
it's
I think is pretty cool, because now you have Christine who speaks the language, right? Because that's what I noticed about RVA is, and I'm not complaining about it because their English is phenomenal, but there are still things that get lost in translation. So I can see why immediately the first thing is to have, another VA who really understands everything do that onboarding call, because now they can have that conversation in their language with their own nuanced stuff and the way they talk to one another. That's awesome, man. Sorry.
What's funny is the segue, like, we have a weekly team meeting, and I don't show up to the meeting for the first half hour, because that's them talking in Tagalong to each other. And like, Tyler's insane. This is what we're doing. Like, I don't get this. Why do you have us do this? Or we're doing this. Like, this is my idea. But they get to explain it in kind of their heart language.
Yeah.
And that has created a much more productive meeting when I join the meeting and we start going through the tasks. And like, I'm the one who runs the meeting. And so I'm burning through tasks, getting feedback, collecting all that stuff. We also record literally everything we do. So we have like AI transcribers that record it, summarize it, make sure we're pulling out all the right action items and whatnot into our task management systems and stuff like that. But the reality is, the Filipino culture is different than American culture, and way different than the Marine Corps. It's not as direct. It's just not. Like, especially if they just got hired by somebody, like, the last thing they're going to do is be like, hey, Tyler, like, I got locked out of my Gmail account and I'm afraid to ask for my password because I don't want you to think I'm incompetent.
Right.
And like,
they're terrified you're going to fire them. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, there's no trust built yet, like in the first 90 days, and the communication hasn't happened yet, to where like, you may say like, hey, I have an open door policy. Like, I love, but they've worked for people that said the same thing. And guess what happened?
They've been burned.
They asked the question and they got smoked, and then they didn't get paid. That's another problem we see. It's like, some of these folks are coming and like, my last boss didn't pay me what he was supposed to. So now I'm looking for a new opportunity. And it's like, crappy CEOs exist just as much as crappy VAs. And so, but that initial 5 days is spent making sure that they get integrated in your actual systems, because everyone's business is different. We have recommendations that we make for different systems that we use internally. And this is like not an ivory tower business where I'm like, I don't use VAs, or like I haven't run an actual business. So like, I'm just Googling what are cool things VAs can do and like giving you a product that actually doesn't have a value for your business. It's
right.
Like, I'm an entrepreneur.
You're doing this, you're using this, you're not,
and that's to drive revenue in other businesses.
Right.
So.
Right. It's no different than like my stuff, right? Like I practice what I preach. I don't just give people advice for the sake of saying it because it sounds cool. Like I actually actively participate in all of the things that I talk about.
Exactly. The only reason we have LTG Assist is because we saw a true need for more companies to find more VAs for more businesses. I think we need to have more VA companies. Like I've got zero problem talking with other agency owners and like telling them how we're doing things, or trying to help them figure stuff out if they're a better fit for people. Because in reality, there are so many small businesses out there that need even just an executive assistant, even just that, to where we'll never run out of people if enough people know about us. And honestly, it's such a blue ocean that I just think more companies need to exist, and we need more of these sourcing companies to do it the way we're doing it, because it's just a good model. But we're using it actually in our lives.
Yeah, I love your approach to this because it's no different than what I'm doing in the veteran space, right? Like everybody's like, well, aren't you worried about competition? You give so much away for free. You're just sharing knowledge. And it's like, there's plenty to fucking go around. And I can't help every single veteran that's out there. As much as that is my goal, I know there's several reasons, right? Like A, I'm just not for everybody, and that's fine. B, I'm not going to get in front of everybody. And C, like maybe my methodologies don't resonate with that person, but there's somebody in my network that they will resonate with. And yeah, I want you to go to that person because that's where you're going to get the help that you need. And it's not a competition because there's more than enough to go around for everybody. And I just love your approach to that and being authentic in that. Like, I'm not selling you something that I don't use myself or I don't practice myself. And that's just it. And so maybe we should have a conversation after we stop recording about how to get into starting a damn VA agency, because this shit fascinates me. I like people. I like managing people. I like to lead. And so, why not? Right? Like, it's just another avenue of business. Something else I was just thinking, like, you say that the problem really doesn't lie in the VA. It lies in that CEO. So maybe something for LTG Assist, another offer through that, not just finding talent, but actually preparing the business to be ready to hire talent, doing an audit on their systems and letting them know like what you identify are places you could hire this person. And I don't know if you've already thought about this, but if not, it's a freebie for you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that's kind of the way we're structured at LTG. Is we have our core values: community, work, generosity. So those three things. But then inside of LTG, we go connect, which is we run free networking events in DC. This is like an example of LTG Connect, like just talking to people for free, doing those kinds of things that are just helping people, no skin off our back. It's just the right thing to do. It goes then from Connect to Assist, which is the VA sourcing agency falls inside that bucket, obviously. And our software as a service like offer inside of that we can help folks with. But then above Assist, it goes to Advise. And what Advise is my consulting practice. And so there are times where we're hiring for somebody and like I get a peek behind the curtain and they're just swimming in whatever it is. And it's usually not me. It's usually them that goes like, is there a way that we could like these CEO check-in calls are great, but like I need more help than just like hiring this assistant. I need help. And that's where we do LTG Advise, which is like the consulting practice. And so that is the kind of next step of engagement if people really want it, where I'll come in and do fractional CTO, COO work on like a retainer and get you set up to where, okay, this is a done with you, done for you service that gets your business in a spot where it's in the modern era. And there's like a data science component to that too, where I'm writing algorithms for folks and doing things like that. But that's the next step. And then beyond that, it's LTG Create, which is the true ownership arm where we would take like an equity position in the business or something like that. So that's where Ardesia architecture and design falls in, is inside that Create column where we're the sole equity owners of that business. And that's where all of our partnerships truly sit inside the business.
Dude, I love the way you've structured everything. This is awesome, man. This is a cool peek behind the curtain because you just explained 5 different revenue models for one company.
Yeah,
man,
and
that's so
some
important
people would say
because
that's really dumb too, though. Like a lot of ways, like it stretches us pretty thin. But my sole focus is how do I drive operations? How do I make things efficient at this stage of my life? Because I still have that full time job, and the way I do that is in the consulting practice is with my virtual assistants, is with plugging those people in. And then the stuff that requires my brain, that's where I spend my time, is not running the things that only I can do the true like deep dive on certain things, then direct people to get the right wires hooked up and the right plumbing connected.
you got to be the capital, not the labor,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I love it, dude. I love it. So great. What's next for you, dude? Like where, as you look into the future, what are the goals and aspirations you have for the business? Obviously we talked about a family office. It sounds like you're headed that direction. So, it'll be nice to say that I got to talk to Tyler Goble before he was a billionaire.
No. I mean, I'm really passionate about LTG Assist. I think that's got the chance. Have you read the book Shoe Dog?
I have, yeah. The Phil Knight.
Yeah, so when he's talking at the end, like Nike got a lot of flack for like sweatshops and those types of conditions. And so I think there's two sides to this fence. But a quote that he says in that book is like, I've seen extreme poverty in the world, and the only answer to extreme poverty is just a ridiculous amount of low skill, low labor, entry level jobs, right? And so LTG Assist is my answer to, man, how can we get as many jobs? How can we create more jobs? And you had another point that you brought up earlier. I'm remembering now, where it's like, why shouldn't we hire Americans? We should hire Americans. We should hire Americans empowered by virtual assistants to do stuff that only those Americans can do, that you're getting the ROI on those people for, right? So like some companies that I've hired for, it's like, man, we're just swimming in this, blah, blah, blah. Like I need an assistant. Like you actually CEO, man, like you don't need an assistant. You know who needs an assistant? Your operations guy. Like that's the guy who needs a personal assistant, because you're having to manage your operations guy and you're his assistant right now. So in reality, it's like hiring assistants for your people at a fraction of the price and building in that into your business. That's where you're like amplifying the talent you have onshore that you can't offshore certain things. Like you're not going to offshore the in-store manager at a brick and mortar place. You're not going to be able to do it. It's physically impossible. But you can sure as heck offshore all the administrative stuff that person's doing. And now their sole purpose in life is to just absolutely delight your customer with the customer experience in real life, right? And so for us, like next steps for LTG Assist is, man, we want to get this thing just rolling. We want to hire as many people as we possibly can. And LTG Assist in a lot of ways is like the beginning of the relationship funnel for LTG, where we get to date somebody for 90 days before we really get into bed with them. And so by me hiring and doing this white glove onboarding for 90 days, like I get into a room with you and I learn about your business. I learn about what you act like when you're stressed out. I learn about what you act like when you've been disappointed by your assistant, and what does that look like? Christine gets to have a peek behind the curtain on talking to your assistant and making sure everything's going good there. And she can give us the honest to God truth of like, hey, it turns out, your buddy Adam that you hired for, like he is a tyrant. Like you do not want to get into bed with this guy long term. Whereas other times it's like you just didn't get to meet that person and really understand what they're about. And so long term, like I don't know about family office. That would be sweet if we got to that size, but like some sort of private equity arm that's more capitalized than what we're doing right now, where really we're like starting our own stuff and bootstrapping it. And that's what's inside the Create portfolio. But I see long term this being our driver for small, medium-sized business acquisitions, equity stakes, and more direct investments into like businesses and stuff like that. So
that almost sounds like the Hormozy approach, what Alex and Layla are doing now. They're buying equity in companies, turning them around, getting some kind of ROI on them, and then they just hold an equity piece of that company forever. Dude, business is so much fun, man. I love talking this shit with you, especially because like now I understand it and I understand everything that you're saying. And like before I didn't. And it just becomes so much fun.
You can compete in business for your entire life. You can only be in the Marine Corps for, 30 years if you really wanted to stay, 40 years maybe. And so, like, for vets and for active duty folks, the military does not have the monopoly on leadership. Like, they may tell you they do, but man, you can make an impact on people's lives by starting a business and running it just with excellence. And that goes for not only your employees, but also the people that you're serving, right? And so I found a ton of meaning in entrepreneurship. And like, how bad do you wish you could have given that Lance Corporal like more money for being just really good? Guess what you get to do in business? You get to give them more money. You give them more time off. Like, you control their schedule, and you're the one who's able to make sure that they're taken care of in more ways than you kind of could inside of a military construct in a lot of ways.
Dude, for me, it's just about being able to have some kind of positive impact on their life, whether that's monetarily, time, just overall work quality. And I'm probably like the worst boss in the world because I just take an approach like, if I'm hiring you to do something that I A, don't know how to do as well as you do, or B, don't really want to do. So I take I'm going to let creators create approach, and we'll figure it out, on the back end. If it doesn't come out the way I expected it to, we'll have a conversation about it or whatever. But, that seems to have served me pretty well along my journey so far, as to really be as hands off as possible. Obviously, you do have to set some expectations and make sure you're on the same page. But I've never been a micromanager. I don't have time for that. It doesn't appeal to me. I hated being micromanaged. So why am I going to go do it? And honestly, the hands-off approach, like with my brand strategist, like everything I have that's branded, it's like I had no input on it whatsoever. He's like, this is how I work. This is what you're going to get. If you don't like it, you can pay me to do it again. And it came out perfect the first time. And it was like, it just unlocked so much for me because I just let him do what he does, And so, when are you getting out of the Marine Corps? Like, why are you staying in?
So when you get your master's, you owe time back. And so I owed 4 years time, and I'm more than halfway done with that at this point. And so we're getting ready to really throw the throttle in a lot of ways and grow some stuff and grow it to start taking profit out of the business to like establish like an actual paycheck that we're.
So the end is in sight for you for the Marine Corps.
Yeah, it's at least for active duty. I'm really, really strongly considering staying reserves for a lot of different reasons. I don't have anything against the Marine Corps. It's been so good to me. And getting to like help the mission and help folks that way. Like, I love Lance Corporals. So like, those are my people. And so like, if I can still have a positive impact in a lot of ways, I feel like a Lance Corporal in a lot of ways. But if I can kind of still impact those folks, but do it by bringing in expertise from the private sector and doing it in like a reserve capacity or just getting involved with that kind of stuff, I don't think I'll ever stop serving, in particular, just younger, either entrepreneurs, younger enlisted folks. Sorry, officers, I think we got it playing good deal. Like, we can figure it out in a lot of ways. Where you already had your college, like, sorry, man, I don't think the biggest need right now is like, how do we help JOs that did 4 or 5 years and get out, at least for my demographic. That might be a semi-hot take, but
I'm here for that take, actually. You just won a lifelong friend in me with that last comment because it is. I've had, and don't get me wrong, I've had the pleasure of having several field grade officers on this show. It's been amazing. Brandon Jenkins is one of them who's still active duty.
I love Brandon.
He's such a great guy.
Call every 2 weeks.
They're good, man. And he joined the community, which shocked the shit out of me, man. And he's just an amazing guy. But we actually, I think on our episode had this conversation, and I think you guys both agree on, like, we as enlisted, we have it a little bit more rough in that transition because we don't have the college foundation. We didn't have the opportunities because we're out there getting dirty and doing it all day, every day. We weren't afforded those opportunities versus like, I know what goes on in the officer world at after about 04, it starts to get political and you start playing the networking games and you start meeting all kinds of people and opening doors. So you're walking into a 6-figure career when you get out. I'm not saying that your transition is going to be any better or worse than an enlisted guy's, but at least the opportunity that's presented to you in those circles that you're running in as an 04 or above, probably even 03s, get really good corporate jobs. That doesn't happen for a fucking 30-year sergeant major. I actually am working with a 30-year sergeant major right now who's working a summer gig in the Hamptons to get by because he didn't have any opportunity. And I think that's sad.
Yeah. And it's not that you don't have opportunity. You don't know it exists and you don't know the right dots.
And that's what I mean. Right. Yeah, and exactly. I'm not trying to say that, there's not opportunity there, because there's opportunity everywhere you look. You just have to know what you're looking for. But that's the problem is, as enlisted guys, we're not taught to look for that. We're stuck in that fixed mindset, one mission, be the best infantry guy I can ever be. And that doesn't translate, like you said earlier in the show, right? Like I can't put I kill people and kick doors down on a resume and expect to get a really good corporate job. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And it's the stigma too of like the really good Marines, really good service members that don't have some crazy social media presence because they're just so focused on the mission and taking care of stuff. Like, that's where you really don't need 2 years to get this all figured out, but you do need a little bit of time, and you do need to like make some sacrifices in different ways to kind of prep yourself to then go into a world where it's just not familiar anymore. And I think coming from like an officer background, there's a lot more like forced networking that has to happen. Like as an XO, like a weapons XO, like I had to figure out how to coordinate with adjacent units, like for training, for all these different things, where it wasn't a foreign concept to me to send an email to a guy I'd never met before and like ask for help for something. So like you can translate that skill set a little bit into like the corporate world of like emailing so-and-so, doing B2B.
You can 1,000% translate it to business, because I do it on a daily basis. I've reached out to 3 celebrities this week for the nonprofit, trying to get them, so Morgan Freeman, Ice-T, and Rob Riggle all served the country. And so I had this brilliant idea that it would help with recruiting efforts if I could get them to acknowledge that QRF Up exists. And the rest of the board was like, there's no way you're actually going to email these people. And I was like, I'll have it done by the end of the day. And I just go look up their talent agencies. I find a fucking email address and I send an email. And what happens? Nothing. I get either no response or eventually I'll get a response. But at least I asked, you know what I mean? And I don't know why that's so hard for people.
Yeah,
because it's uncomfortable.
Of being a like insurance salesman on LinkedIn where you're DMing people cold, and that's what people think networking is. And the reality is that's what they think, right? And they think it's like a greasy, weird, like very transactional thing. But what networking is just getting to know people and figuring out how can you serve that person. Like I mentioned a little briefly, but we run a meetup in DC, and we don't sell anything at that meetup. We just try to help people and we just talk to people. And in a lot of ways, I think people have lost the ability to actually talk and have a real conversation in real life with folks. Ironic because we're doing this over like Zoom. But
brother, if I could afford to flow into DC and brought all my equipment with me, I'd have sat in your living room or wherever, coffee shop, and I would have loved to have done this in person. And if I can make it up there for the Army Navy game, we could do another one in person. That would be great. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you. And that's been my approach. I don't sell anybody any. You can test to this because I reached out to you cold. I connected with you and I sent you a message like, hey man, this is what I do. Like, would you be interested in coming on my show? That was it. That was the whole thing. It's really not a big ask. I'm actually offering exposure to you because I have a platform. Everybody wants to be on a podcast. And because I've leveraged that, I've only had 2 people ever tell me no.
Yeah. Yeah. And but that's the part I think that's missed out on is like, they think that networking is like for just weird, like greasy insurance salesmen. But like, I promise you, just meet people in real life and meet people eyeball to eyeball. And those connections are worth like 50 online connections, And like you and I have gotten to know each other really well during this hour and a half and in the time we talked before. And so like now there's a good relationship there, but relationships aren't built on cold DMs alone and like sending a bunch of emails and spam. It's but you don't need to have this massive following in order to get to an opportunity that helps you a ton. Like if you just intentionally reached out to 5 different people for a month every day on LinkedIn as a vet, asking for a little bit of advice, I guarantee you, what is that, 150 people? Like one of those 150 people will be the person that helps you get connected where you need to go or points you to a resource that you need to get to.
And you don't have to guarantee that because that's exactly what I started in November of 2023 on LinkedIn. I had 93 followers. And I don't know, in 2 months, I had booked, 15, 20 meetings, meeting people, being invited to communities to learn. Some of those people are now my mentors who have helped me get to where I'm at. Some of those people have opened doors for me. One of them's my brand strategist. Another one's my copywriter, right? Like you don't have to guarantee anything because I'm living proof that it actually works. I'm telling you that it's worked, and I've done it recently in the last 10 months. Like it's really that simple. And that's what networking is it's not being afraid to reach out to somebody who resonates with you. That's important. They have to, you have to have something in common with them, right? Like, for you and I, it was you're a veteran and a business owner, right? Like that's my whole thing, so I wanted to talk to you, but also look at who they're connected to. Are they connected to other people in your circle? Well, if Tyler Goble sees that I'm connected to Brandon Jenkins and he goes and looks into me and sees that I had Brandon Jenkins on my show, he's 100% more likely to say yes to coming on my show than if I just reached out to him cold with no explanation saying, hey, come on my podcast, right? Like it's
my inbox is full of that.
Right. Right. And so just be authentic in reaching out to people and have a genuine interest. And like you're saying, don't be the scummy insurance salesman. And the only reason I laughed is because I actually was a scummy insurance salesman. I started and I'm super jaded about it. I didn't know anything about the insurance industry. I got sucked into selling final expense to seniors, knocking doors. So I was doing it in the South, in the poorest counties in America.
There's no shame and stuff like that, and like learning and those kinds of things. But I think you've been overwhelmed with that. Like the buddy you hadn't talked to since high school, reaching out and saying, "Hey, how's things going? I know we haven't talked in a long time. Just wanted to see how things are going. Do you have any financial plans?" I know for sure that guy doesn't actually want to talk to me. He's just gotten coached to go through his list and not provide like. And man, I feel bad because I actually got coffee with a guy that is with Northwestern Mutual, and I told him all this. But
you told him how shitty his training program is, that they're making you reach out to your warm market and sell to them. I think that's the worst training you can give anybody in sales.
It's not necessarily you should reach out to your warm market. You should do that, but you should do it in a winsome way. And sometimes the winsome way just isn't scalable. And that's where
it's not.
It doesn't work for every industry. And again, it's like another shortcut thing that we talk about. Like the work is the work, and the work needs to get done. Like you can't shortcut that. And if you're going to reach out to your warm market with people that you actually care about, you've got to take more time with those kinds of reach outs, and you have to genuinely want to talk to that person. And you have to be okay if that person's not who you need to serve right now. Like that's fine. Like it's not a big deal. Like, but the thing that doesn't systematize and that doesn't scale. And so that's one of like the things that I'm trying to figure out as we're growing this agency is like, I'm talking to all these CEOs and I love it, but it takes a lot of my time to do that, and it's like, how do I scale that without losing the true human to human connection and the true help? And the answer is like, it's not AI, it's not machine learning. It's probably just more people. And it's more people inside my world that fit the same culture fit that I believe in. And then that's where you're literally duplicating yourself via the culture you're driving inside your own business.
I think what you're talking about is hiring a networking professional.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. It is true sales. It's true sales.
Right. Yeah.
It's not I'm going to like a Tony Robbins or that one crazy guy who's like, his wife spends 20 minutes with their kids, whoever that guy is.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
have you seen that meme? So whoever's listening to this, go look that up. And it's like the guy's bald. He wears like a kid's medium shirt and like super tight pants. But his wife is like, I give my kids 20 minutes of my time. It's so valuable. And I'm like, that's insane. Like
that's not
what we're talking about here. That sales will make you money, but you will lose your soul in the process. And so to not lose your soul and invest deeper into people, like that's the bet we're making with LTG Assist, is like we're investing so deeply in each of these CEOs that I'm betting that they're going to bring people around that also need help, and that we can help those people. And that is where you win your time back, because
with referrals. Yeah.
It's a referral-based business.
Referrals, man. It's so powerful. So powerful. And I love it, man. I love everything. I could sit here for another 2 hours and talk to you about this stuff. Dude, tell everybody where they can find you if they're interested in, hiring through you. I assume your business has some kind of process. I will be a customer of yours in the future. Honestly, I mean that, because I like what you're doing and I know that it's valuable to me. I'm sure there's a ton that I can learn from you in that process. So if I'm interested in getting a hold of you to hire, can you just, kind of point people in the right direction, tell them where they can find you, what that process looks like? Yeah.
If you just go to ltginvestments.com/assist, I think it is. Let me make sure I didn't fumble that address there. But, ltginvestments.com will get you to the right spot no matter what. Yeah, it's ltginvestments.com/assist. But we've got a form, you can fill that out, and we can get something scheduled. But I live on LinkedIn as well. That's where I post the majority of my stuff. And yeah, that's really it. I'm pretty easy to find, and I love people. And
yeah, he's super approachable. It was like a 5-minute reply. He's like, yeah, absolutely, let's talk.
If you're selling life insurance, I'm not approachable. So sorry.
Yeah. There's a right and a wrong way to sell life insurance. If you want to know the wrong way, come see me. I'll fill you all the way in on that, and not just in life insurance, but I did property and casualty and Medicare, Medicaid. So I've got experience in all of them.
Yeah,
just enough to know that when people come around recruiting me, I just tell them to fuck off, because I'm not interested in that industry anymore.
People need insurance. So don't hear us saying that you don't need insurance.
Correct. I'm not. That is not what I'm saying.
I need real salespeople to exist in the world. Like, and salespeople, in my mind, like there's two things. There's marketing, which is like all math based. How many people get through your funnel? Like what % convert without you ever talking to them? And then there's true sales, where like you're building relationships with people, and that is the end goal, is to build a relationship. It's not to sell anything.
Let me ask you this then, having just said that, because sales is such a driver of any business, it's so quota based, it's so numbers based, like you've got metrics you have to hit. Do you prefer to have salespeople that maybe lengthen the sales cycle a little bit because they're building quality relationships? Would you say that that's better?
Yeah, I would say what you need to do is you need to manage your finances in such a way that you don't have a gun to your head to meet a quota. That's where you get in trouble. Like if you can manage your finances and the business itself and scale it appropriately, that's the difficult part. That's where we got in trouble with flipping houses, was we scaled so fast, so quickly. Like we were buying a house every 3 weeks. We were putting hundreds of thousands of dollars through our account, like on a monthly basis. And that got really hard to manage, and hamstrung us from being able to make decisions in a way that made sense sometimes. So that's where we made our mistakes in flipping houses. And I think the same thing kind of carries over to business, where don't ever find a way to separate time from the sale, to where time is not a factor anymore. And like, yeah, lengthen the sales process needs to be as long as the sales process needs to be, like at the end of the day. And the end goal for us has always been deep relationships, build community first. We're going to work really, really hard. And we want to work with people that are generous. And so if you fit inside that pinnacle, and like you appreciate hard work, and we can build a good relationship with you, maybe you don't even need my service, but you need to talk to my buddy Adam Whitney, who's raising money for an apartment complex. Like maybe that's who you need to talk to. That's fine. But I know for sure that we helped you. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters. And inevitably, you're going to come, either someone's going to get directed that we can help from you to us, or we're going to help you in some other thing that I don't even know we're going to be doing in 5 years from now. So
yeah, the universe has a way of rewarding that kind of behavior, and it will come back to you, right? Tenfold, probably. Just because you don't make a customer out of that person, you did help them. Maybe they send you 4 others that you end up doing business with. I love that, man. Dude, what is the last question for you? What is one thing you want everybody that listened to this today to take away from, the most important thing or the most important lesson you've learned? Like what is that one thing you want them to get from our conversation?
Yeah, everything sounds super good on a podcast. And even the statement of like, don't worry about how long your sales cycle is. It doesn't matter. Just focus on the relationships. 5 years from now, you'll be able to buy a loaf of bread for your family and feed them. Like, don't discount the fact that you need to make money right now. And sometimes that money comes in the form of just having a job and not being an entrepreneur immediately and bootstrapping whatever it is that you're doing. Like, don't let comparison make you go crazy and see what somebody's perfectly polished social media presence looks like and be like, why am I not there after even 6 months, 12 months, 2 years of doing whatever it is you're doing? Because you just don't know what happened behind the scenes for that person. They may have gotten connected to someone who just poured rocket fuel and mentored them for a decade before they got where they're at. And so don't compare anybody. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Have a sense of urgency, but don't be in a rush. Like, get yourself into a position where you're not making decisions based on a time crunch, and don't compare yourself to what you don't know. Like, you don't know anything else. Just get better.
I love that, man. Comparison is the thief of joy. And what you're not seeing by those perfect polished social media profiles is the immense amount of grinding that went on behind that, right? You could even look at
blackjack odds that dude hit 21 3 times in a row.
And those are outliers, right? That's not the norm, right? The norm is go back to November of last year, look at my LinkedIn profile and see the crap, the absolute shit I was throwing at a wall, seeing if it would stick, and then compare that to what my profile looks like now and how the messaging is and all the things that I've been able to accomplish. Like, that didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen overnight. I didn't get lucky. I studied and I learned and I failed. And man, yeah, dude. Everybody, please don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe. Help get this in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. It's a lofty goal, but there's 19.6 million veterans in the United States. So there's absolutely no reason that can't happen in the next, I don't know, what do we got, like 7 months? So please do that. And thank you for spending time with us, Tyler. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tyler Goble.
Appreciate you guys.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.